Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 55, featuring Dr. Lemny, an amazing artist and advocate for mental health, as well as a leader in this Web3 space. And I'm also grateful to be able to call her a friend. Welcome, Dr. Lemny. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Saturday morning. Can't complain, right? Ready for the weekend?
I am. I'm definitely ready. It's been a long week, so.
Nice. And you're joining us live from New York, right?
I'm in New York City, all the way from Washington Heights. So it was good, everyone.
Nice,
Thank
nice.
you.
Welcome. Awesome. So yes, welcome everyone to Web3 Warriors. I'm your host, David Krome. I go by Krome in the metaverse. And today we're going to be talking to Dr. Lemny about her amazing Web3 career and everything she's up to and her awesome artwork. But we're also going to look at the topic of mental health in Web3 in this blockchain space. We've touched on it with a couple other guests in the past, but I think it's always important to kind of emphasize self-care, emphasize, the other elements of this space that can be a little bit stressful, right? So I'm going to just identify kind of three things that I've heard from mostly creators in the space. It might impact collectors to a lesser degree, but I think it's really about, how creators navigate the space and artists without getting stressed out too much. So one of them is really kind of dealing with the pressure of selling, of course. I think there's a lot of perceived overnight success in the NFT and Web3 space. And so there are a lot of pressures. A lot of people think, I'm just going to mint an NFT and I'm going to be able to sell it for half an ETH and make thousands of dollars relatively easy. And often that's not the case. I've heard recently that there's a success rate of maybe even just 5%. But again, it depends on what you call success, right? I think a lot of people are in the space for different reasons. So we'll talk to Dr. Lemny about that. Another thing I've heard a lot of is just feeling overwhelmed about the pace of technology and the fact that the space is evolving fairly rapidly. Just in the last 6 months, we've seen AI really blow up, which, is tangential to the Web3 space, but definitely part of the overall ecosystem and having a big impact in Web3. But beyond that, there's all these different elements of the blockchain, different types of blockchain, different marketplaces to go. So it can be a little bit overwhelming for sure. A lot of different technology to take in. And then the third one I want to touch on is also just the idea of lack of access, right? And the fact that there are costs associated with participating in Web3 and NFTs, especially in the Ethereum space. The gas fees can get a little bit pricier, and some of the NFTs tend to be priced a little bit higher. And to get around that, we've often recommended on this show maybe trying Tezos or even Solana. They have some smaller entry points and they don't charge as much for gas as well. But even then, there's still some costs associated. You have to have decent enough technology, or at least know your way around the technology. And then on the access front, there's also, question of demographics and the fact that this kind of community skews a lot to wealthier people. It's not maybe as diverse as many would like it to be, but it all depends on kind of the corner of the community that you go to. But that is an ongoing conversation as well, as far as access and representation in NFTs and Web3. So those are kind of my big three that I just want to put out there for a little bit of thought-provoking, and then we'll dive into a little bit more with Dr. Lemny here. And I also just want to encourage everyone to check out our metaverse space at web3warriors.io, where you can sign the guest book there. And everybody who signs during this season, at the end of the season, we're going to have a giveaway for one of these limited edition Avril 15 wearables that are really cool, that were built by Jagar and emulates our Avril 15 Season 2 number 6 NFT that we like to use as our mascot on social media and that. So do check that out, web3warriors.io. Had to get that quick plug in there. So without further ado, thank you, Dr. Lemny, for joining us so much. I really want to get into mental health, get into your NFT projects, but maybe before that, you can just give a little bit of background, where are you from and what brought you to Web3? And welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, David, for having me. So I'm Lemny. I'm a trained clinical psychologist, and I've had about 28, 29 years of boots on the ground experience working in social services. I'm from New York City. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, a creative, and really came into Web3 because I really appreciated this advent of being integrated, of having kind of like all facets of myself coming to the fore and joining together. So all these elements of my desire for social impact, as being a psychologist and someone who, has been pretty active in my own like personal communities here in the hood in Washington Heights, and just really wanting to leverage the technology. I think that when we came in, when I came in 2 years ago, I first heard about NFTs in October of 2020. And I was just like, what? I was like, don't talk to me about tech. I am not interested.
I hear you.
Yeah, I wasn't, David. I was like, oh, this is tough. It's not my wheelhouse, but I saw the promise and the potential. But to your point also, you were mentioning earlier, you were talking about this whole notion of like finances and entry points and accessibility, and this desire for money to be for wealth to be redistributed, right? I think that was one of the big conversations that we were having when I came in. So that was very appealing to me in terms of being someone who was an executive, had already reached, had peaked in my profession as a director of behavioral health at a federally qualified health center. And while I was there as an executive, what I noticed was that I had a lot of impasses when I wanted to create and develop programs. And that was something that I noticed that I didn't have to deal with in Web3. So I was like, oh, okay, I can, create these, beneficial programs for other people without having to ask, where people just have a buy-in and I can redirect this, these funds. And so that was very alluring. In addition to that, David, I wanted to do art, bro. Like I had a kind of like embellish to that.
No
For the
doubt.
space, for allowing us to kind of like come in and like express ourselves. If you're someone who likes to do social impact, but also happens to be an artist and also happens to be, X, Y, and Z, then that's what this space affords you. So that's why I'm here. That's what brought me here. That's why I'm still here. And I just love the people in the space. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, never too long-winded. That's beautiful. And, I've often said it was gaming that kind of brought me in. It was the idea of the metaverse and the idea that these digital items actually have real world value right now, right? But it was the community that kept me here, after the hype of all the, going to the moon and the big promises of this, that, and the next metaverse, after all that died down, it's people like you, it's people like many other guests that we've had and people I've been able to meet in person, like yourself. I met you in New York first, and then we even touched base in Miami. So that was really awesome to be able to actually just meet the people that we're building with and that are really just inspiring me to keep going in person. I think makes a big difference. So you hit on two key points there, I think. So there's the removal of the middle people, right? The people who tell you, no, you can't do that. Instead, just going like right to the masses and being able to kind of pitch your project and get around that. And then also being able to be more artistic or find a new avenue to actually share art where you didn't think that was easy for you to do before. So how has the artistic side of things gone? So you would say like prior to Web3, would you have called yourself an artist, or how did that go?
It was a hobby.
Yeah.
It was a repressed art form for me, at least the visual art, because I've always written, and then I expressed that kind of like academically. I have a master's in writing, and that was always something that just kind of like I explored. But when it came to like the visual arts, I'm a film school dropout.
No shame, no shame.
No shame. Like, I was first generation going to college. My parents are immigrants from Dominican Republic. They were like, you are not going to do film. Like, this is like the late 90s. You're a woman, you're poor. Like, that's not happening. Like, get practical, please. Go do something that's going to pay you, pay your bills. So the one thing that was very practical to me and that made sense, and that I could be the truest form of myself was in psychology, because I could not see myself as a business person, kind of like putting on this facade that wasn't me necessarily. So anyway, to make a long story short, I wasn't necessarily encouraged to do art. So in the NFT space, one of the things that I've really taken on is being encouraging and elevating others in terms of like expressing their artistic voice and their vision. I've been able to sell work. I've been collected. Who would have thought? Before, I used to do like small IRL shows, before coming into NFTs. But with this space, I've been really able to garner a larger audience. One of the things that has been really wonderful in the social media space is being able to have reach, right? And so I've been able to really grow Twitter, a Twitter platform that really allows me to not only utilize that to kind of like voice my own artwork, but really to kind of like integrate community and really highlight the work of others, and to have that reach, because I've really seen, David, like people like blow up and explode from retweets that I've done,
Wow.
and it's a beautiful thing. There's so many people like I can't even count, and I'm like, I remember when.
That's awesome.
You
That's
know?
actually so inspiring, and I love to, push out those retweets, any art that, resonates with me for sure. And it does make a big difference. And I've seen, your Twitter following blow up, and you're also just so genuine out there, right? Like genuinely trying to uplift people, genuinely putting out self-care tips, like really just positive mantras and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's really inspiring. And definitely, yeah, your Twitter blew up like crazy. I think you're like me too, right? Where you had very relatively small numbers on Twitter prior to Web3, and it just kind of like exponentially blew up after Clubhouse days, early Clubhouse days.
I had none. I had no Twitter. I had
Wow.
no Twitter.
Literally from zero.
No, Trish. Trish was the one. Trish was like, we were in Clubhouse. It was March, and she's like, Lem, you need a Twitter. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you really need to do that. And then when I went on there, I had so much fun. I couldn't stop. Like, I got like addicted to it. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it's a passion project of mine. Twitter is, like it's kind of like my legacy. And so it's really beautiful to kind of like engage with people. And like you said, it works if you do it from your heart. Like it really has to be something that's genuine. People feel it, whether you can see a person smile or not. There's a vibration there that's underneath, those interactions that we have electronically.
Definitely.
So yeah,
without getting too political, are you concerned about the shakeup at Twitter or any of the recent changes, or you think it'll just be onward and upward?
Man, every day is different. Day is new, David. Like, I don't know about you, but like it feels like, gosh, like every week is different. Sometimes I'll be thrown for a loop. I'm seeing the same people. Now I have to pay for this. Now I have to like change my algorithm and and try to do this or switch that up. And also like in terms of like shifting, right? How do you do that in a way that's kind of like honest, and genuine and true to you, and not kind of like bending to the whim of like, all right, this is changing, this is shifting, but like trying to stay honest and like not selling out or like, I don't know, like I feel like for me, what works and something works differently for everyone. For me, definitely what works is being able to go with the flow, as much as possible. And you can resist all you want,
Yeah.
but it's gonna keep moving. So yeah, it's best to allow sometimes, what can you do?
I like the metaphor of the town square, and the idea that Twitter is a kind of town square, but it's an international town square, and there's very minimal censorship. And even though, whatever, again, without getting too political, some things maybe should be censored, but in general, I do like the idea that it is very much a pro free speech, very much like everyone can kind of find their tribe and share their vibe, and then people resonate or they don't, and it kind of grows from there. So it's been very cool to see how you've kind of built that out, and congrats on that. And best of luck continuing to build it up as you grow to 1 million followers. So what would you say is your kind of priority right now in Web3? You've got some awesome art. You're definitely attending a lot of IRL Web3 events and speaking engagements and things like that. So if you had to kind of nail down, this is my goal for 2023, or these are my priorities, what are you working on right now?
Thank you so much, David, for that question. That's a dope question because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot and reflecting on, and I encourage, and I think for me, it's just being more present, because like you said, I think your second point was how quickly the space moves, and for me, I feel like I'm constantly like hurrying from this thing to that. I really want to be much more intentional. I want to kind of like drop down and have a certain level of like profundity. A lot of the projects that I've done have been quick, and I think that that's kind of like the nature of the space. But I want to be able to determine and have more of a say in the narrative of what's going on for me while I interface, right, with the space. And I think that a lot of us get carried into the flow and thrown in, and just kind of like we tumble, it's like a wave. And you're like, all of a sudden, you're underwater, you're spinning, and you're like, all right, I need to come up for air. So for me, It's coming up for air, fam. Like, seriously.
All right. That's good.
I want to do projects that are have impact, that are, that have love, that aren't just like, oh, I'm just dropping this art here, or just like nonchalantly doing this or that, but not taking myself necessarily seriously in that way, but more like having more of a regard, for the work and intentionality and a deeper purpose, so just kind of like codifying that and really elaborating that and making sure that that's much more clear, because I think that in the past couple 2 years, my thing has been really like just leading by example, and just kind of like being the light, and not so much like I don't, my style is not to tell people what to do. I don't like people telling me what to do, so you got to be the change, so
Right.
for me, it's really just shining as much as possible and being comfortable with shining my light. I think a lot of us, have a hard time with our gifts and talents, who happen to be, introverts or people who haven't really kind of like have a spotlight on us in that way, and so to come into Web3 for me, having no social media and having like a really like, private psychologist life, like this is a lot to kind of like get used to, so coming into myself in the face of others, in the face of the public, I think in a way that is respectful and I want to be careful, David.
No.
Like I want to take care of this. Like social media is very fickle, and cancel culture is ridiculous, and we work really hard for our names and for the work that we do, and we don't want that to be destroyed, so having those things taken care of is important to me this year. Thank you for asking.
No doubt, no doubt. No, that's great. And that's very much in line with the topic of our conversation here today as far as self-care and mental health goes, right? So what does that look like, projects that, or even just doing work in the space that's more intrinsically rewarding, or even maybe it's taking a step back and just, focusing on self-care more than necessarily pushing things on social media and Web3. But I think it comes down to a balance, right? So what is it looking like for you this year? I know you've got some pretty cool AI art. You've got different kind of elements you're working on. So it's not like you're taking a full step back, right? So what does that look like? What does that balance look like for you?
Yo, I'm so hyped. We talk about it. Thank you. I got balance for that because honestly, like, okay, so this is the year that I'm in New York City right now. Like last year, I was in California and in the Dominican Republic. So like I'm in New York, and like with all of this, like I'm constantly traveling. I've got a really wonderful fellowship at the Brooklyn Museum, which I'm really excited about.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you, fam.
Wow, Brooklyn Museum, damn.
Yeah, it's dope, yo. Like so I'm in the art research and teaching program there, and so we're getting trained to be art guides, and it's really wonderful to kind of like have that experience of like night at the museum.
No doubt, no doubt.
And just kind of like really become acquainted with that discipline, and how objects became acquired, and really speaking about social justice. One of the things that the Brooklyn Museum does is speak about land acknowledgement and how, the museum itself is like, on sacred land, where like,
Wow.
the revolution was fought on. So like, not having these conversations and really speaking to truth, I think that there can be a certain level of superficiality, and in life in general and in business and commerce, in order to kind of like get money, you have to like package things up. And so for me, I think this year is integrating my life and everything that's happening into the art. So the AI that I'm doing, one of the things that I'm having a lot of fun with, David, I'm on the subway all the time. I'm taking pictures of people all day.
With their knowledge or without their knowledge?
It's a public space, man. Without their knowledge. I'm extremely shy,
Yeah.
like, okay, let's talk about consent, right? Because someone's like, do they know that you know? And I'm like, I'm in the street.
Right.
Like everything, people are recording me. Not that to say that, what I want to or not, but, when we're in public, there's a certain level of like anonymity that we're not afforded, And so in any event, I was always really shy to hold up a camera, and with cell phones, it's completely different, because people just think you're on the phone.
Right, yeah.
So I've been able to capture some really beautiful shots, that I'm even kind of like, I'm not even taking credit, I just happen to be there,
Right
and
place, right time.
I just press click, man. And I've been integrating that into the AI, and what's been coming out has been absolutely stellar.
Oh, interesting.
Really, yeah.
Is
So
that
I
what that
can't wait
tweet
to
this
talk.
morning was from? Did that start out as an actual picture and then just went through the AI?
Yes, sir.
Oh, neat. Yeah, that was a cool one. You can check it out on the Web3 Warriors Twitter. We retweeted it there, or on Dr. Lemny's Twitter. But yeah, you got a lot of cool AI art there.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
neat. So that's what we can look forward to. The next project probably going to be this Subway series.
The Subway series. I'm also working on, and I think this one's going to be a little bit of a long-term series. This is a dissertation. So my dissertation for clinical psychology, I worked on exploring kind of like women's stories about ethnic identity development, self-esteem, hair, colorism, particularly among Dominican women.
Hmm.
So I interviewed them. I did a qualitative study, and I just really wanted to get their experience about what this was like. It's a phenomenological study, so they're the experts, and I really would love to. I've started to, have this in a graphic form, and so I'm translating that into an NFT project, and I'm really excited to, share these women's stories, like, the things that we experience, these day-to-day lives. I think one of the most important things for me as well, David. I think one of the things that we've talked about is that in art, the commoner's experience is not necessarily always shared. It's always the people of privilege and people who have, wealth and money and access, etc. And so for me, it's always important that accessibility, inclusivity, diversity, and all these voices that are marginalized are included. That's
Wow.
always been my work, and I very much identify as one of those people, but I also understand and am very aware of all the privileges that I have. So I leverage and utilize those for the spaces that I don't have for myself and for others, if that makes sense.
No
So
doubt.
those are the projects that are coming.
That's super exciting, and definitely I love the social justice angle, and I know, yeah, Dominican people is a beautiful range, right, of color and background, so that's a lot of nuance there, I could imagine, and definitely look forward to seeing that. I want to give a shout out to Fractal in the chat. He's saying sending love from Colorado. So shout out to Igly and Fractal there. And Ingrid was also just saying that Dr. Lemny's been such an amazing help in the space. And there's, someone who you could reach out to and ask any questions, and you answer directly. She's asking also if she's asking, was there a person or people who helped you answer questions directly, kind of the way that you're helping people now?
Yes, absolutely. Of course. Like we have to do it for each other.
Yeah.
This doesn't work. Like there's an expression in Spanish that says una mano lava la otra. So like one hand washes the other. Like we cannot do this alone. It takes a village. It's a community. It's there were so many things that were given to me for free. That how could I not pass that forward? And then also having kind of like the wisdom to understand what are the things that I have the capacity to give, and what I can't, and that's going to change at different points in time. Like right now, all I can do is tweet for you, fam. Maybe at some point I can buy your work, but like that's all, and so like being able to receive, there's been a lot of people who have given to me in this space. I mean, okay, so as a clubhouse baby, who came out of that incubator, in Q1 of 2021. It was a glorious time, man. Like for the people who were not able to kind of like have that experience, and everybody has a different experience, because I feel like anyone who comes into the space has that kind of like honeymoon phase, where like everything is
No doubt.
romanticized. It's a utopia, it's a Shangri-La, like everything is dope. No one can do any wrong until then money gets involved, and then things start to shift, and then like politics and like, all these other things, and like real life, happens, but we start very fresh and very new and novel with these very beautiful eyes. And so with that comes a lot of altruism, and so I think that it's really important as the years pass by and we continue to be in the space that we keep that ethos very much alive, because that's what sustains us, that compassion, that love, that's what nurtures us. So thank you, David, again for that dope question. Yeah.
No doubt, no
And
doubt.
No, that was Ingrid's
That
question.
was
My bad.
Ingrid's
Taking that
question,
back.
yes.
My
Thank you,
bad,
Ingrid.
Ingrid.
We always love a nice question from the chat, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And Sasha's sending some love as well. support the way you can. Very true. Yes, definitely true. Appreciate everyone hanging out in the chat. If anyone's new to the chat, definitely feel free to chime in, ask any questions of Dr. Lemny or myself. We're just having a cool conversation about her Web3 journey and what she's up to right now, kind of building, and a very active member of the community, active on Twitter, active at IRL events. And that's kind of my next question, So we met at New York for the first time in real life. Of course, we had met on Clubhouse long before that and spent many hours talking about Web3 and NFTs, but looking at Miami as well, where we met there. So why, you say you want to have an impact, or you're focused on definitely continuing to have an impact and look at kind of social justice angles. Why do you think it's important to be on the ground at these IRL events, and how do you think that makes a difference compared to, obviously promoting on Twitter, joining spaces and Clubhouse rooms, but what's different when it's kind of in person, and why do you think it's important?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, as someone who's always been in the trenches, again, boots on the ground, you see the real immediately. You see a person's vibration, you can see into their eyes, you can see their truth, you can see their reality, you can assess, you can get nuances, and different types of information and vibration that you do not get on the audio apps, that you do not get, in the Twitter spaces, that you don't get in these things. And so you can really establish and solidify these relationships with people, because once you kind of like connect in a physical realm, then that just kind of like really sets things at ease. And not just that, there's a recognition, David. There's a spiritual recognition. I'm not, I was trained as a psychologist and not talk about spirituality, but in the Web3 space, like this is a space for you to shine and to be honest and to keep it real with you 1000, you don't want to lie. And so for me, spiritually, I see so many people that I've met in so many different realms and spaces. Their hearts are like so familiar to me, and it's like a coming back again, I'm a Buddhist, so reincarnation is something that's real to me. I'm like, holy shit, we're getting back together again. Like, how you been? It's been a while, so for me, it's kindred spirits, kindred souls, and for that, I'm extremely grateful for. And that's my experience. It doesn't have to be anybody else's, but that's what IRL does for me. I'm able to kind of like hug and connect and lock eyes, in a way that's very profound, and very meaningful. And it's just very loving and holding. And for me, for my mental health, being in this space and being very isolated in the way that, Web3 can be, because it's a very ethereal space. That we have that opportunity. I think that human beings need that. When babies are born in terms of like attachment theory, if you're not touched, if you're not spoken to, if you're not regarded, you're not going to be able to relate to other human beings in your development, and your ability to associate with others, and to love and, to express all this, diversity of like feeling and expression is going to be limited. And so that's what IRL does for me. I can connect, network, obviously. Duh.
Of course.
Saying,
that's the obvious one, yeah. Network, go and network.
Yeah, but I mean, networking organically, David, because I feel like people throw themselves onto you, and I'm just kind of like, I try to be present. I don't force things. I think people like, have a laundry list of all the shit that they want to do when they go to these events, or they want to get into like the exclusive one, and then you show up and it's crap, and it's not what you expect it to be, and I'm like, when it comes to the conferences and things like that, I'm really just kind of like open and just receiving. I really try to have very low expectations, and not try to take myself too seriously, because you'll get disappointed.
Right. And so you've been able to get into some of those more quote unquote exclusive corners, right? Like you're going to be speaking at NFT NYC. You've attended some other kind of bigger Web3 events. So what do you think about that point I raised, kind of the last point around accessibility, demographics? Because a lot of these events are really expensive, right? Like definitely upwards of even close to $1,000 or multiple thousands of dollars, or on the lower end, maybe a few $100s, but even that can be not really accessible for a lot of people. And then what happens, demographics wise tends to skew in one direction, right? So what do you think about kind of that side of it? Because personally, I go to these events, whether it's Art Basel, NFT NYC, and I have very little interest in going to the many $1,000 event. And if I could spend the money on it, but I'd rather not, and it's not really an expense I personally can justify. And I feel like people have to be at a certain level to even want to justify that. And then, like you said, you get into these events and they're not even that good. Meanwhile, the satellite event that was $10 down the street is bumping and, everyone's having a good time. So what do you think about that? And why is there this kind of contrast? I've mentioned it as an allegory to kind of an opera crowd and a hip hop crowd, and it's like the opera crowd is spending all the money, is getting all the sponsorships, is kind of the bougie crowd. But then the hip hop crowd is where the actual fun's happening and it's cheaper. Sometimes it's free, it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting contrast. What do you think about that?
It is. This is Web3. That's not divorce the fact that like they're still, fam, like we still have like social strata. Like we still have like, like social spheres of like, of people who kind of like look at different types of like echelons of society, and social class, and what that means. Like social class is ridiculous. This is something that for me, my gosh, personally has been, I grew up in the Dominican Republic. In the Dominican Republic, you either have or you have not.
Right.
In the global South and in the global North, like when you think about these things, and what's so dope about Web3 is that we have everything, just like what you're saying. And so we can't forget the fact that like, we're here, but we're not in a bubble. We're still kind of like impacted by the fact that we're human beings. Right. And when we come together in real life, like those nuances, they show, and it's kind of like, you'll go into like, these high salinity events, and it's kind of like, you're not warm, you're not open, you're not like relaxed, you're not loving, like you're not even dancing. Like why are you even playing music for? Like I need to move. And so like for me, like I that's one of the things that I've found really is a lack of soul, So I'm really hoping that we can integrate like opulence and have opulence that's soulful. Those things don't need to be divorced. Like, we could be fly, and just like have a lot of bling and shiny and beautiful and be humble, because I think that a lot of the things, and to be honest with you, one of the things that has been really off-putting for me in this space and in this community, and thank you for allowing me the space to talk about it,
is
ego, fam. Let's talk about that shit. I can't stand like people who are full of themselves, and what happens in the space is you get a little bit of a recognition, a little bit of notoriety, a little bit of money, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, don't talk to me, like I get like, nah. Like I'm not for that. Like it's very disappointing. If anything, like what is respected, is this ability to leverage that, and to like acknowledge, I got money and I'm gonna use it, to like help other people, not to like, get myself full of like, of this type of like self-gratifying thing, and I understand that, as a psychologist, obviously, that's coming from different places for different people, and at different times, but it's big and it's a lot. And when you go into spaces and Twitter, and it's not warm and you're not welcomed, and it's a boys club, or there's a high barrier to entry, it's not welcoming, and who wants to be a part of that, you're gonna implode. That's not sustainable, so sorry to tell you.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering long term, like even last year when I was at NFT NYC, there was a lot of talk about, maybe they made money, but do they, like PR wise, it wasn't a great look. A lot of those, the ones that you paid big money for were like dead or not very bumping. And like I said, I went to all the satellites. Most of the satellite events I went to were really dope and like not very hard to get into and just good times, so I'm looking forward to doing that again. But yeah, it's an interesting contrast, I really, to your point, opulence and soulfulness can be combined, and maybe continuing with that hip hop analogy, maybe we're just still in that nitty gritty early days of hip hop, right? And we're getting to that opulence and decadence eventually, working our way up there.
Absolutely. And not losing sight of the prize, or getting lost by like the toys. Like a lot of people like, remember the years where like everybody's like the Lambo. And, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, use that money, fucking like, we finally got it. Go fucking do the projects you were talking about, right?
Right.
So And I think, David, like a lot of us had different intentions when we came in and then got distracted, so the coming back into that focus, I think is super important.
No doubt, no
So
doubt. I feel that. And honestly, that was part of what kind of inspired this podcast, looking at early last year. Like the high was just wearing down, and I was just like, well, I'm having these awesome conversations. And, we've both been plugging away at the Dream Conduit and having conversations in Clubhouse and things like that. And it was just really inspiring. It's like, okay, well, how can I like whittle this down and just have like a focused conversation with one creator or team of creators at a time? And so I'm glad we've been able to do that. And really, like you say, focus on the soul of the matter, which is creating opportunities, taking advantage of technology and innovation, and above all that, building community and actually trying to push this new opportunity for more people and, open the doors to access and, kind of making a name for yourself, It's a cool opportunity.
It really is, David. Like everybody's, my estimation is that everybody's brilliant here. Everybody has something to like offer that they like have an expertise with. Like everybody's smart. Like otherwise you wouldn't have been able to get to this point. Like you have to like in order to like reach this pinnacle. I feel like there's so many barriers that you need to break through. So many things that you need to kind of like understand and learn, and kind of like grow through. Otherwise, you can't stay here. You won't be able to because it'll burn you out. And so I think that the people here are brilliant. They're stellar. And that this is finally our opportunity to be like, yeah, we're all dope, we're all bosses and we can all shine together collectively, and I really love the advent of the DAOs because the DAOs have really kind of like brought in that notion of like every voice matters, right. Rather than and I think also like when I came in, it was kind of like this notion of like democracy. It was like, all right, all the artists are here. 1 week is going to be this person's turn to shine and everybody's going to like come around them and like support them. And then the next person. And then like all of a sudden, like the attention got, the attention in the space got greedy, and then people just wanted that shine all the time, and we got human, fam, so like, I feel like it's important to always revisit these conversations, because it's not that it's not going to happen. It's that when it does happen, how do we move forward from there? Because it's never going to be a perfect life. The cancel culture is bullshit. We have to hold people accountable. At the same time, they need to heal and you need to reintegrate them back because where the fuck are they going to go? They're not going anywhere. Otherwise, they continue to do more harm.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So, and this is someone who's speaking from working in prisons, right? So like I'm just kind of like saying that Web3 is no different. So bring in your skill sets from like all your other lives, and be able to kind of like do the impact to like help each other. But like, when we start kind of like get full of ourselves and like all those egos get involved, then we're not even doing the work anymore. All of it is a show. Right. And it's become a lot of that lately, and that's, I feel like there's cycles, when things shine, when they break apart and they come back together again, and so it's very interesting and a privilege.
It's all a learning curve as well, right? So when you speak about people getting greedy, right, and I know we've talked about this before, there's this contrast between the PFP kind of like big collection side of the NFT market and the more, limited edition, one of one art collector kind of side of the thing, and obviously PFP collections can still have amazing art and still require a lot of artistic input, but to your point about the greed and maybe even a little bit of gambling, dare I say, right, there's this idea of, I'm going to buy into this project and because it's doing XYZ, it's going to be going way up in value and then I can flip it and make a bunch of money because of course Bored Ape Yacht Club did that. A few other select projects have been able to do that really well, but to your point, I think a lot of the focus in the space shifted from let's create dope art and support dope artists to how can we find the next best Bored Ape Yacht Club. So what do you think about that contrast? And do you think it's still as much of an issue or it was definitely at its kind of height in 2021 and maybe we're getting back to the art now? I don't know.
Gosh, that's oh my goodness, this is something that I continue to observe and to wonder and to think about because what becomes a standard and what becomes a trend is constantly shifting and changing. Like I think that at least when I started in my journey here, like it was all like one of ones. You would do your Genesis project, your project would be 1 ETH, because you're giving yourself worth. and this is exemplifying who you are, and your self-worth as an artist finally, and like, and so like there was a lot of that, like, your art also being attached to like who you were, and your financial value, and that not being kind of like determined, right, by a gallerist or a collector or etc. So with all that said, I have a newsletter. Yeah, I printed one. It's on my Twitter. And
Cool.
in there, I kind of like speak about my experience of what I saw of what the Bored Ape Yacht Club was, right? And I think that a lot of different people have different experiences, but my experience, my perspective was they were not part of the art community, and so like, and not to say that there shouldn't be, other people in the space, obviously, like there's a fucking blockchain. Are you kidding me? Like there should be everything. Like I want to see hospitals up in here, like everything, like
Right.
the whole entire universe. But the way that it was done for me, and the way that my experience, while we were in the clubhouse, like there were a lot of quiet players and farmers, who were kind of like farming and doing research, on the expense of the artist. Now, can I compare that to like me walking around New York City and taking pictures of people who are just kind of like there at my behest and at my whim to take a photograph and then put it up on and do my own art? That's question. That's what is that about? Where are the ethics? All right, comparing apples and oranges, right? But my experience was that when we were in Clubhouse, we were being listened to. This information was taken and packaged, and all of a sudden, these people came out like ninjas in the night, and just like threw the shit out. And I was like, yo, what is going on? And you were either gonna go in or you weren't. And I was just kind of like myself, the way that I was kind of like my perspective and the way that I was seeing things at that time. And a lot of people had different experiences. Like, well, just go ahead and buy it. And you don't know. No one knew what the hell that shit was going to turn into.
Right.
Nobody knew, And so like, and long story short, I'm getting long-winded here, but for me, I didn't identify with being part of that community. Like I didn't see myself as a good old boy. I didn't see myself as a frat boy. Like I didn't see myself like that. And so that's how I perceived and that's how I saw that they had presented themselves. Like the art wasn't like that fucking impressive, so I was just kind of like, it was just different. It wasn't, obviously it wasn't art for art's sake, it was a cultural, financial, monetary movement,
Right.
that was had different aims and different intentions, and it wasn't aligned with what I wanted to do necessarily in the blockchain. So to see the culture shift from like, everyone wanting to do the one-of-ones to doing a billion fucking PFPs to going back to like, a billion editions of these one-of-one artists, a billion editions, yo, I don't give a shit. I'm tired, fam. Anything that gets saturated, I'm done with. Like, yo, like I don't want to see another cyborg AI. I'm over it. Like, yo, it's just like it gets played out, and so we go on to the next. And this is we're talking about kind of like cycles, right? Like something comes in and it's beautiful, and then it gets completely exploited, and then it's buried. And so I'm really curious to see what's next. I think that the one-of-one artists are always going to stand. That's our bread and butter. This is who you are. Like that's your heart. That's your passion. That's who that's never going to die. So if people want to invest, always invest in that. You're not going to die. Investing in an artist, it might take time for them to grow,
right.
but they're always going to produce. When it comes to PFP projects, and things like that, that's questionable.
Yeah, and to your point, the art is, very few of those PFP projects have legitimate, like, amazing art that you're just proud to have for art's sake. At least with the limited edition art, I think, if worst case scenario, you don't have it like accrue value or go up in value or whatever, or maybe the artist gives up on NFTs, which has actually happened to one of my favorite art pieces. The artist behind it, she just it didn't resonate with her. She wasn't feeling the community and she just dipped out. And I think maybe one other collector bought one of her pieces. Amazing artwork, by the way. But it's probably never going to go up in value because she doesn't like NFTs now and she has no interest in the space. But I love the art piece, and so I'm happy with that. And we'll see where things go, right? So, but to your point, I think not every collector is in it for the art, and to each their own. I think there's a valid reason for the PFP type of projects and the idea that it can be used for fundraising and really building towards a project. But as we've seen a lot of the times, that's where the term rug pull comes from. They claim to be building towards a project, but they take the money and run and buy a Lambo instead, or whatever the case may be. So looking at your art, I did want to hear just what kind of inspires your artwork. I know you've got the new collection now using AI, so maybe that has a different inspiration compared to these limited edition pieces we're looking at on known origin here right now. So what inspired these kind of limited edition art pieces? And then maybe I want to ask you about AI after that.
Okay, so I was really exploring. I did one multiple edition project, and I think that was when Lensa came out and everyone got pissed. Everyone's like, everybody's doing AI
Lensa
now.
picture is awesome. This is really cool.
Thank you. I think that the culture and the space was going towards like mass adoption and like how to bring people in, and so I was like, all right, whoever collects this one, is allowed to do that. And that piece didn't do anything for me. I was like, I am not an editions person. I know that people want my one-on-ones. It's just what it is. And that makes sense to me. And everybody does really kind of like unique work. People do, not everyone. I'll take that back. Like a lot of people do unique work in the space, but I feel like the work that I do in particular, my art process is extremely organic. I'm not thinking. It's very much flow. I've taken art classes my entire life, and so when I'm in art class, I put on my P's and Q's, and I like to abide by technique, and everything. And in terms of like my own personal exploration, abstract art has always been the thing because it's where I feel the most free. And thinking about the people who kind of like influence me. You asked me, where do my influences come from? Obviously the city, the people that I'm around, the artists from the city. Like Basquiat, I think, is like always, being Haitian, being Dominican, that connection, being a New Yorker, and also Puerto Rican that he was, being Caribbean, having those influences, that kind of like very kind of like primal primitive feeling of being tied to the earth and being tribal, is very important to me. And so when I see like and being able to kind of like interface that with tech, and I'm on my iPad and I'm doing all of that, that stuff, all of those things that's happening, you can write a book.
No doubt, no doubt.
But the shit is like, we don't talk about that enough, David. I feel like we talk about like the money all the time and how you gonna sell it and what's your plan and like the management piece and like all of that. And administration is important because I feel like, but there's no balance, that like, let's talk about like your heart and your spirit and the soul that came into kind of like doing this. Like artists, like we pour our hearts out, and for me, I think one of the things that Web3 has allowed me to do is to say and claim that in ways that in IRL and Web2, like you couldn't be like, yo, I'm an artist. It's like, oh, you were Sotheby's, are you collected? Have you shown, all this? Right. Did you go to art school? Do you have a degree? Have you done a residency? Like all these things that are kind of like go with that discipline and that profession, and like you said, there's only a limited amount of people who really actually quote unquote make it in this space, and so like, what are we working towards? And what do we want to talk about, and what are the spaces that we want to cultivate and nurture? And for me, definitely, my influences is just really talking about what the hell's going on. Personally, it also, like, a lot of my art has to do with my relationships with people in the space. Fam, yo, like, I know that it's not good business to talk about bullshit that happens, yo, and I know that people have a lot of drama and how to package that, but put it into your art. And I think that for me, it's been a fantastic conduit to put like my pain, my frustration, my anger, all the things that society doesn't want you to do in different spaces, but allows in art. That's where it's going. So that's what I'm doing. Hopefully
that's
more.
Awesome.
Yeah,
no, it's really cool. It's really cool. It comes through for real. So when you look at your AI art, like your new pieces you're talking about, do you kind of share the same inspiration? You're just using AI as kind of another tool, and it's still kind of like you said, right? You're taking pictures on the subway. It's still inspired by New York, inspired by maybe the multicultural city and just people in different settings. So yeah, you kind of, it's a through line, you would say. Those inspirations are kind of a through line through all the different art you do.
I would say, because there's also a lot of storytelling that I haven't yet gotten to,
Mm.
and I know that that's like, I notice that like whenever I see that, there's a lot of like, and also I love it. Whenever I see other people doing that, like there's a gravitation towards that because there's a depth there,
Nice.
and there's like an elaboration. It's not just like the image, like you give people that opportunity to like project and do whatever the fuck they want with your work, but at the same time, you also have something, a relationship and a conversation and a discourse that you want to present. And for me, I don't think that I've been as intentional with sharing those stories. Like
Mm.
I feel like people feel the fervor of the work, but I haven't necessarily taken it as seriously to be like, this is the story that I'm telling here, and this is what's happening. And I want to be very clear and explicit with that. And I think that that's the power of the artist, is to
Mm.
kind of like have a perspective and to have a voice. Of course, people are always going to take with it and run with it and do what they want. But there's also a certain level of like freedom that I want to have with my work when I come to it. I don't want to be 1,000% selfless. And, you can have it, but like
Right.
shit, I'm here too.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
It's a
like,
balance, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's difficult, but I think you're striking the right balance, and it's always inspiring, honestly. So I did want to hear, like I mentioned, my kind of top 3 stressors that I hear from creators and artists in the space. What is a top kind of stress from a mental health perspective that you kind of experience or that you've seen other people struggling with in the space?
Yeah. Thank you. This is an important question. This is a conversation I think that we have in different ways. And some people do it well. And some people do it in haphazard ways. So for me, what's really important as a clinician is to see people not only self-caring, but being mindful and having a certain level of discernment. I think that there's a lot of trust that happens because when people get a platform, if you grew up with TV, the person on the TV has authority, just by default,
Yeah,
kind of sort of.
I think that authority is being questioned more and more these days. But that
Right?
was the case. That was the case back in the
That
day.
was the case. So like, with these platforms, everybody's famous now,
Right.
and so
Right.
just by having a platform, so like people have a lot of inherent power, by default.
Mm.
And so and people give them that power. And so like when you go into like a Twitter space and you treat this person like an expert, and they take that on, and you're like, question that, like, who are you making an expert? Who are you giving your power away to? Like, like where is your own wisdom? How are you kind of like directing your own experience? Who are you giving away your attention, your money, your resources, your assets to? Like, I think that it's really important to be very mindful of like your energy, to observe yourself. I think that one of the things that has happened for me, that I think that I've struggled with is saying no. I'm like, yo, I'm coming out of the flow, and I'm turning off the Twitter, and I'm taking a nap, fam. And taking that nap. If you missed that nap yesterday, you missed the whole crash. And
Right,
so like
yeah.
every day is drama. But like, how do you accept the fact that every day is going to be drama? And that you can hop back in at any moment in time.
Yeah.
That people think that you'll be forgotten. And in some ways, it's not a forgiving space in that way. Like we for the way that you make people feel will never be forgotten, yo.
Right.
So if
Right.
we focus there, that part, how we interact and deal with each other, and how we can kind of like connect and make impact in that profound heart, soul to soul. Like, yeah, stop trying to sell shit.
No doubt.
Trying to connect, be real, like bring yourself, like make money, but like that comes like, I don't know, David. I think that this comes with like age and maturity, and like just getting older. Being in my 40s now, I think that's something that was really important to me in my 20s.
Mm.
Was just kind of like this hustle and this aspiration to achieve,
Right.
and to like get things done. And I think now that the desire to get things done isn't so much for name, or to be like to prove something to
No
somebody,
doubt.
or like to myself or otherwise. Now it's kind of like I know I can do all this shit. I'm comfortable with myself. Like I really just want everybody to be fucking okay. I
No
want
doubt.
everybody, because like if you're not okay, I'm gonna feel it, and I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And like I don't have to deal with your shit because I have to fix it. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm being facetious now, but like I then have to fix myself, right? Because I can't fix you, but I have to fix myself in the face of you. And so like it's a constant back and forth. So in terms of like mental health, having awareness, of how I come across, how I impact others, how my voice carries, and what I want to do, self-awareness is super important in this space, and I don't think that enough of us are doing that in a way that's kind to each other. Like I'll
Right.
see some people like oof in social media come up and like bum rush somebody, and I'm like, oh, you like, why you gotta be so hard? Like you
There's a
gotta
lot
be
of that.
so.
Yeah, the drama is unfortunate, and I think there's a lot of high strung emotions. But like you said, we got human, right? And so we are still human. That's the reality. So maybe if you had your top kind of mental health tip, it would probably be know your value and take the time for self care, essentially, right?
Yeah, please, breathe. Notice, take time. Ground. Uh, take a deep breath. Every now and then, just take a long deep breath in. Notice how you're breathing, because your breathing really is determining how your body is functioning. And we don't even like recognize that. So that's a really fast, quick tip. The faster your breath, the faster you make everything work. The faster you will die. So the slower your breath,
Slow your
the more
roll.
calmer you are, the calmer your life. It's like a turtle, right? Those turtles live a long life. Insects, I don't know. I think they last a week. You see
No.
how fast those motherfuckers move.
For real though, for real. That's some good advice.
So,
I've taken that to heart. Breathing practices makes all the difference for sure. And taking that time out. If you need a nap, go take that nap. Don't worry, the world's gonna keep going. And to your point, yeah, the tech moves quickly, but we're also still early. And if you miss something, there's the next thing that you'll catch, and it's really not a big deal. So I think that was great tips. Thank you.
it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So we're going to be winding down here. I got one more question for you. If anyone in the chat has any questions, now is your time to ask them as we wind down. But I am curious, what do you think as far as the metaverse, right? Do you think, because we hear both sides of the argument, right? People are going to be lost in the digital space and not take time for themselves and self-care. But then, I've seen some pretty amazing spaces that are built specifically for self-care and for meditation and kind of a refuge, right? And that could be a good thing depending on what you're going through in your day-to-day life, right? So what do you think the metaverse, what role do you think the metaverse can play in mental health as we kind of advance in Web3?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a really wonderful question. I think that, like you said, we're still early. This technology has still yet to be explored. There's different kinds of like comfort levels. Why are we going into the metaverse? What are the opportunities there? Mental health is something that is really being explored. The industrial military complex is up in there doing their research,
Right.
and checking it out and seeing, particularly with trauma, and exploring ecosystems and environments that are going to provide people with these visceral experiences, that are going to allow people to heal, and so I feel like how do we balance and make sure that we keep our feet on the ground, and don't have this escapist culture, and are able to kind of like integrate and able to kind of like provide refuge, and a sanctuary,
Right.
right, for people to come in and really heal up and be present in ways that they can't be afforded, because of different impasses or different things that IRL does not allow you to.
Mm-hmm.
So I really look forward to the research studies, and just kind
You're a
of
true
like,
academic. That's
sorry,
why you got
man,
that doctor in your name. You know what to
I
look
love,
for. You don't mess around with
I love
YouTube.
the
Go
science.
straight to the studies, right?
It's important. I want validation. I want proof. I'm kidding. We, all of us, all of our experiences, we are all scientists here, and we all are kind of doing our own assessments and investigations and things like that. And we're all coming up with our own results and evaluations of how we feel we have utility with these things or not. And so like, I feel it's so important for people to do their own research, and to do what works for you, because my experience is not the same for you, David. Like
No doubt.
you, me, we're not the same. I can't continue to compare myself to others. Like, I feel like that's something that's really important in this space. Like, individuality is kind of like, can we finally do that? Can we finally do that part? Instead of all of us trying to be the same, it's like all
No
of us
doubt.
actually trying to be the same in the sense of being ourselves.
Yeah.
It's time that we stop being afraid of really being us. Like, we really try to conform to be accepted and not be left behind and all these other things. But this is really an opportunity for us to disrupt those old paradigms,
Exactly.
of like power and like who gets to say who I am. Like, I think that a lot of people are exploring like identity politics. This has been really like, with social media and particularly, the voices that have been marginalized and have been coming in with kind of like, in terms of like sexuality and like non-gender conforming and like all these conversations that like we did not have 20 years ago,
Yeah.
are happening. And also like you're seeing the art. Oh my God, like it's just like super dope to come into like a virtual reality where like you potentially don't even have to have a gender, like exploring all of that and giving people that opportunity to like make their own happy. It's a different world, David.
For
I don't
real,
know what else
for
to
real.
tell you.
That's it. We're definitely on the precipice of a different world. And I think that to each their own is a philosophy that I like a lot. And I think that having that collaboration over competition, I think, is another paradigm change that we're trying to do, right? And we often say also abundance over scarcity, and there's this whole obsession with metrics, obsession with, like you say, comparing yourself to other people and thinking that, you're useless or your voice doesn't matter if you don't have, over 1,000 followers or 2,000, 5,000, whatever that number is for you. But the reality is what really matters is just taking your time and putting in the creativity and connecting with like minds. And, that might just be 3 or 5 or 10, whatever. It doesn't have to be a massive network. And over time, these things grow, I think. So lots of amazing tips there, Dr. Lemny. I really appreciate your insights. Really, really awesome conversation. I hope everybody who's tuned in has been enjoying it and taking value from it. I think you've hit on so many key points. I did want to ask you on this loss of trust piece that you have here. Is this a little Dr. Lemny that is in the picture here on this collage piece?
Okay, loss of trust. Remind me, because I name them when I look at them and I forget the names.
It says, please forgive yourself. And there's this adorable little girl who looks like she might be 2 or 3 years old. And I'm assuming it's yourself, but I was just curious. On the loss of trust piece, it's owned by Dahlia. Well, I'm assuming that's you, and it's adorable. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, but
no, all good. I want to be able to speak about it. I have to look at it, and then it'll trigger me for sure.
You're good.
So
It's
someone
amazing
bought it,
piece. It's really amazing. I just I love your art style and really look forward to seeing what you're building next. And continuing to put out different art on the blockchain. Just last question: what do you say to those who are skeptical of the blockchain or don't see the opportunities in NFTs and Web3? Maybe they're listening to the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So what are you saying to the average person out there who maybe you talk to and an artist maybe that has a lot of skill and you say, hey, you should try out NFTs? How does that conversation go for you?
Gosh, I was just having this conversation with my art teacher.
Nice.
He's completely off of social media altogether. He said that for him, his interest and his desire was much more to get into his art, and to not have kind of like this conversation with what all of the I guess he was seeing as a distraction or the noise that was coming in, and so for hm what I was telling him was yes and yes and avow, you don't want to disavow, obviously, like that's your truth. Like I don't that makes sense to me 1,000%. Like, it's not my experience, it's yours. I respect that. And and also there's so much that you don't know that can happen that you didn't even expect just by coming, and so what you didn't know that you didn't know will occur, and so with that, like, at least opening yourself to that, and allowing yourself to be surprised, I think is important, because you don't know what you're going to find here. You might be looking for something and find something completely different, and not know that you needed it,
Right.
And so, like, I'm extremely grateful. I haven't sold 1 billion NFTs. I haven't made 1 billion volumes and traded, like my floor is in 1,000, Tesos or whatever it is. But I've really been able to connect with people here. I've been able to be impacted, to like really do art finally, to show my work. And to engage in these conversations and to be a person I can be, you know, and then nobody tells me that I can't. So to that, bells to all, to your freedom, you know, bells to all your aspirations being fulfilled, to all your obstacles being removed, fam. Like, this is a space for you to explore your freedom however which way you want. And nobody can tell you nothing. If they want, go fuck them. You know?
That's a true New Yorker vibe right there.
I'm sorry.
That's the truth, though. You know, it's just to each your own, and you have this opportunity to open a door of basically a whole new world of opportunities. You might not even realize different avenues that are now open to you that you can explore. And yeah, allow yourself to be surprised. I really like that. As a collector in the space, you know, I have a few pieces I've minted myself as well. But as a collector, the surprise, I love that angle of it, because I do post, you know, some artwork that I love, but I'm willing to let go for a fairly higher price, right? Because that's how it works in NFTs. And so it's always, you know, I don't sell that many, but the few that I have sold, it's just a random surprise, right? And it's like, oh, you know, I got 0.5 ETH, you know, like that was unexpected. And so that's the kind of thing that can happen in the space, as far as like, don't list things or mint things just saying or expecting to actually sell it overnight. Allow yourself to be surprised, right? Allow yourself to be patient and to learn and grow. And when the time comes that you start selling, you'll be pleasantly surprised, and who knows where it'll go from there, right?
That part, I'll say one, and then I'll shut up. I know we got time, but like just one real quick. Yo, I had this one piece that sat on foundation for 6 months, and it was my haute couture from like my Genesis collection when I first came onto the blockchain. Yo, and I was not giving it away. Like, I'm like, nah, I don't care how things work here. Like, this is how things work with me. Like, you know, like I'm selling some, you know, this is my ready to wear collection. This is my haute couture. I don't give a shit if there's a floor and I need to go up from there. I'm like, you're going to either buy this at this point or buy that at that point because you like it or you don't. I'm sorry. Like, I don't have time for that. Like, it's just like, I didn't come in with that mindset, fam. Like, nobody told me that that's how you had to do it. Right. You know, like, who said so? Like, who?
Set your own prices.
It didn't exist. Like, we didn't have, like, to me, like, no, I don't know. That didn't exist to me. Like, I needed to do a floor and then bring it up, like, whatever. Like, I wasn't brought up in a traditional art space. So, like, anyway, to make a long story short, as I was telling you, is that that piece, then I burned it and I put it into this one show that Motivate was doing, and he did this one you know, show on where was it? Hold on, Pennsylvania Station in New York City. Nice. Okay, and this was done with Mogul. And they requested artists to submit their work. 400 artists applied. 80 were selected. I was a top selling artist.
Oh,
after that piece sat for 6 months, fam. That piece was bid. And it was sold for 0.8 ETH.
Nice,
okay.
Congrats.
Like, yo, I have pieces that are worth 0.00008. Okay, like,
there you go.
It's a breath, and so like I feel like these experiences and what I've learned is that like you don't know what's going to happen, where things are going to go. You know, like you watch something sit for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, like you know. So it's really beautiful to just kind of like observe yourself.
That's it.
Thank you for this opportunity. I love you, David.
Such a valuable lesson. I appreciate you, Dr. Lemny. Thank you so much. Not seeing any questions from the chat. I think we're good to go. Just last plug, if you haven't already, visit our metaverse space at web3warriors.io and sign that guest book for a chance to win a really dope wearable. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be live back next week. And until then, we'll catch you in the metaverse. Thank you, Dr. Lemny.
Thank you. Blessings, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Peace out.
Wow.